You know, it's a tough one for me as someone who's been watching this all play out very closely over the last several years. You know, there was so much optimism surrounding the 2015 nuclear deal, JCPOA. It was this, frankly, the singular foreign policy achievement of the Obama administration. We saw that taken off the grid by former President Trump. We've all been waiting for what Mr. Biden will do next. How do you see this playing out in the short term?
In the short term, I think that it's a good sign that the Biden administration has made some moves recently to show that it's interested in moving the process forward. But however, the Iranians would think that many of these moves are largely symbolic. What they're looking for and what they want most of all are some signs that the US is prepared to actively lift sanctions such that the Iranians have access to the monies they need. There's unlikely to be movement on that front for now, but what we're looking for right now is whether there will be a meeting between the US, Iran, and the other JCPOA parties as proposed by the Europeans. So that's very much what we're waiting to see.
You know, you just have to wonder how much leverage Iran really has at this point. Certainly the government being maybe different from the feeling on the street. I mean, you've seen this country ravaged by COVID, ravaged by sanctions, and so much pressure that's been putting on basic staples like food, even in importing into the country. But when you think about this with regards to sort of the leverage that they have, I mean, saying that they're going to block inspections, I mean, that doesn't necessarily do anything for the United States, but it really doesn't do anything for them. Is the Biden administration going to be able to call them to the carpet on this?
Right. So that's a really interesting point that you're making, because you're right that stopping inspections does have disadvantages for Iran, because some of the opponents of the deal say that Iran is sort of trying to advance towards having a nuclear weapon, and not having inspections will only make this more uncertain. But from Iran's response to this, we can see that it is cognizant of these issues. And we can also see the divide within domestic Iranian politics between those who are more hardline and those who are more pragmatic, like the current Rouhani government and Foreign Minister Zarif. So the accommodation that they have reached with the IAEA is that for 3 months, Iran will continue essentially with the monitoring activities. It's just that they will keep the records away from the IAEA. And if the US lifts sanctions in 3 months, the IAEA will be able to access those records. So there's no problem of a monitoring gap in principle. What this does is it gives some space and some time for the US and Iran to try to work out a solution to the sequencing problem. But of course, there's a much larger problem ahead, which is what happens after there is a return to the deal, because US President Biden has premised the return to the deal on getting a stronger and longer nuclear agreement with Iran, as well as dealing with other issues like the missiles and Iran's regional role. Now, Iran is very reluctant to discuss these issues. And in fact, Foreign Minister Zarif explicitly said that these issues, at least his position for the moment, is that these issues will not be discussed even after a return to the JCPOA. So that is a much larger problem that the two parties need to work out. In that there are different expectations about the final goals and how to reach them.
Feng Qin, from your understanding, how critical is the situation today? How close is Iran to being able to produce a nuclear weapon? Of course, it says that's not its goal, but could it if it wanted to?
Right, so that's a very interesting question. So we have several different issues here. So one is the amount of uranium that Iran needs to have for a nuclear weapon, right? So in terms of enriching weapons-grade uranium, which is about 90% enriched, I think the current estimate among analysts is that Iran is about maybe 3 or 4 months away from having that amount of uranium. Now, Iran is not actually enriching up to 90% right now. Iran has set a goal of enriching a certain amount of 20% enriched uranium, in the recent law passed by its parliament. But that's not enough to get to a nuclear weapon. So that's one aspect. But besides that, there's also the issue of weaponizing the enriched uranium. So Iran has to be able to design and test the bomb and fit it to one of its one of its ballistic missiles, in order to have a proper weapon, usable weapon. So that's an issue that's completely separate from the enriched uranium issue. So as it stands, Iran is not particularly close to having a nuclear weapon at all. And in fact, it denies that it's currently seeking a nuclear weapon. But of course, issues that stem from concerns from, Iran is widely believed to have had a nuclear weapons program prior to 2003. So there are still some outstanding concerns that, it would be good for Iran to sort of lift on that area.
And just quickly, what role do you think that US regional allies in our part of the world are going to play in reaching an agreement here? The likes of Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Israel, will they get the seat at the table that they want?
Right. So signs from the Biden administration so far has been that it's going to put US interests first. And of course, it's said that it's going to consult widely with regional allies, including Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel. But it's unlikely to tie the ultimate decision to what these regional partners want. The opportunity is for the regional partners to have their say and to express their concerns and to sort of provide input on the next step of the process should we get there, about finding a way of living with Iran in the region, some mutually acceptable solution to its ballistic missile programs and its role in the region. They have their work cut out for them because, for Iran, these capabilities are quite important for its deterrence and defense, because Iran's air force is actually quite integrated, and the ballistic missiles are its means of trying to stop military action against it from its perspective. So these are not issues that Iran will easily negotiate. And I think that the regional allies of the US also need to be realistic about what is achievable going forward.